Someone came yesterday, and their life had been somewhat shattered. But after spending some time together, this person asked the question, well, what about death? And I gave her an answer. She looked at me and she said, oh, you're scary. It's the first time I said that. But you know, when we get together, it's an alchemy. And we know the ways of alchemy now. And we know that the stories, the elements that we add to our pot, to allow them to ferment and bubble up a little bit. But on Sunday, a very important story was told. But today, before telling that story again, I want to add another ingredient. And so we can see what it is that happens when we add these chemistries together. Now for those who heard the story before, there is that possibility of recognizing that it is a chemistry, and when you add these elements, they can bring a different effect. And for those who haven't, well, the effect is going to be there in one way or another. So there's a story about a Buddhist seeker after enlightenment. He was with a Zen master for many, many years, and he attained a certain level of awareness and adeptness, and it was time for him to leave his master. But before he departed, his master said to him, just be careful that you don't become a beggar. Well, the adept went off, and very soon he had a number of followers. He had people coming to him to listen to his wisdom. He had this degree of enlightenment and light around him. So he gathered souls. It even came to the ears of the emperor, and he became an advisor to the emperor. He became rich and famous. One day, as he was riding along in his very, very ornate carriage with white stallions pulling it along, on the side of the road, they saw an old beggar, his straw sandals barely being held together by pieces of string, using the branch of a tree as his staff. And the adept stopped his carriage and jumped out and prostrated in front of the old beggar. It was none other than his own beloved and revered teacher and master. Now when his teacher and master lifted him to his feet, he looked at him and gently said, oh, I see that you've become a beggar. The story that was told on Sunday was the story about a Hasid, one of those who follow the way of Hasidic Judaism. And it so happened that this Hasid was impelled to go and visit the great founder of Hasidic Judaism, who was called the Great Maggid, the Baal Shem Tov. His name was actually Rabbi Israel. But when he came into the presence of the Great Maggid, he was very blessed to be invited to the Great Maggid's table for the Sabbath meal. And in the course of that evening and the next day when they went to the synagogue, the presence of the Great Maggid and the words that he spoke uplifted the Hasid, so his heart was just singing and light. But it came time for him to take his leave from this great soul. But before he left, the great Megid said to him, I believe that on your journey back to your home village, you will pass through such and such a village. Would you be kind enough to stop there and give my love and greetings to one who is a beloved friend and disciple of mine? Oh, the Hasid was so uplifted. Not only had he spent time with this great, great soul, but now he was going to meet an illustrious friend and of the great Megid himself. So with great joy, on his way back to his village, he stopped at the village where this said soul lived. And he went straight to the synagogue and he asked, could you please direct me to where I can find Rabbi Menachem? Because that was the name that was given to him by the great Megid. So they said, we've got no Rabbi Menachem here. No, we haven't got anybody by that. Our rabbi is Rabbi Yaakov. We haven't. And then one amongst them said, oh, I wonder, could he mean Mad Menachem? And I said, yes, please, show me where I can find him. Show me where I can find him. Oh, he said, Mad Menachem. He doesn't speak to anyone. All he does all day is pore over these ancient books that nobody knows anything about. He doesn't speak to anyone. He tells stories to the children sometimes, and even they think he's crazy. But the Hasid insisted, and so they directed him to the house of learning, the yeshiva. But before he departed, one of them said, well, if you want him to speak to you, just tell him you're hungry. So the Hasid went off, and when he came to the house of learning, sure enough, there was a man sitting over a large and ancient tome buried in it. And when he went over to him, the man took no notice of him at all, just kept on reading what he was reading. So the Hasid waited, but after a while he tapped him on the shoulder and said, I'm hungry. Immediately, Menachem got up without a word, took some coins out of his pocket and went off and bought some bread and some sardines and brought them back and put them in front of the Hasid and waited while he ate sardines and the bread. And after he had finished eating, the Hasid said to Menachem, thank you so much for this. I've just been with the great Megid. All of a sudden, Menachem's face lit up like the sun. And the Hasid said to him, and he's asked me to pass on his love and greetings to you. Well, Menachem just expanded like the light was flowing out of him. He said, please, tell me more. Tell me every word that the great Megid said. Tell me. So, very happily, the Hasid related the conversations that had taken place between he and the rabbi, and then he told the stories that had been told by the great Megid in the synagogue during the course of the prayers and teachings. And with each anecdote, Menachem seemed to expand into this great, glowing, joyous being of light. After the Hasid had finished recounting what had transpired between he and the rabbi, the Hasid looked at Menachem and he said, you know, you're such a learned man. You have such great knowledge and power. You could become famous. Why don't you become a rabbi and teach? No, said Menachem. I have much to learn. I have much to learn. But after the Hasid had taken his leave, Of course, he couldn't help but tell everyone he met about not only his experiences with the great Rabbi Baal Shem Tov, but he also told the story about Menachem. And so a delegation of people went to the village to seek out Menachem and ask him to become their rabbi. But he refused. Again and again, when anyone came, he refused. So these people were quite determined. So they actually went to the great Megid and said, "We've asked Menachem to be our rabbi. He will not be our rabbi." The great Megid said, "Well, you go and you tell that Menachem that I order him to be your rabbi and your teacher." So they went back to Menachem and they told him that the great Megid himself had ordered him to become their teacher and their rabbi. But still, Menachem refused. So, not to be deterred, the delegation went back to the great Megid. The great Megid said, "Bring him to me." So they went off and they brought Menachem into the presence of the great rabbi himself. And the great rabbi sat there very sternly and he said to Menachem, "I demand, I order you to teach these people, become their rabbi." Menachem said, "Great Tzor, if you ask me to go and jump off the edge of the cliff, I will do so gladly, but I cannot become a teacher and a rabbi." Great Megid jumped up on his chin in anger, and he said, "Well, in that case, if you will not do what you're ordered to do, I will intercede and see that the gates of heaven are closed to you, and you'll be relegated to the deepest levels of hell." And Menachem's face went white. Tears started to roll down his face. He bowed his head. And after a few moments of silence, he looked up at the great rabbi and he said, "Even if I am relegated to the veriest, lowest levels of Gehenna, hell, I cannot do what you ask of me. I cannot become a teacher and a rabbi." With that, the great rabbi, the Baal Shem Tov, got up, came over and embraced Menachem with tears in his eyes. He said, "My beloved friend, congratulations. You have passed the last and final test." His final words to Menachem were, Go back to your village, be empty and be full." What do these two stories mean to us? What happens to this chemistry as we put them together? How do they interact? What do they evoke? beggar when we become famous and great in giving and in teaching.
Still kicking there, isn't it? So, we can be still wanting to attain something.
Look for ourselves and see. We know there are many stories of those great lamas who come out of Tibet. They've come out humbled and yet they've been debased by fame and recognition. We can see those who have attained those levels. Adulation. Not to say that we judge them as impure in any way. They're following their calling, following their mandate. But we look and we see a beggar. We see the beggars. Do you agree?
It's kind of tricky in a way because I'm just reminded of that story of the woman that was in the cave.
Yes,
English
in the
woman.
snow. Yeah.
And she spoke about just wanting to stay in the cave, but her teacher
Yes.
instructed her to go and create
Build
monasteries.
a monastery and go around the world and speak.
And so she's doing it reluctantly.
Absolutely. So we have this.
Gee.
We have this. Yes, we can look and see. But for ourselves, when we bring it down to this very personal level.
Is it that being within our true nature?
Absolutely. What was Menachem doing? Because, as was said on Sunday, there's not a trace of humility in this story about Menachem. It's not about humbleness or humility. He wasn't being humbled. I wouldn't call him a humble man in any way at all.
Could even be called stubborn by
Some
some.
could be called stubborn by some. But there's something there that we can recognize. What would it be? What word would you give it? When we know the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree, and he was tempted by to become a great soul, a great teacher, the power of so many people. And of course, the dancing girls and the demons too. They came in different forms.
Identity.
Identity. Something. To become something. Would you agree?
Begging of status or begging for recognition or begging for superior knowledge.
Absolutely. We could even be a beggar and still be like that. Because our very begging puts us in the position, I'm superior to you because I'm not like you and others I don't have the need. You know,
So where does that leave us in the actual doingness of our lives? Where does that leave us in moving forward? I mean, does that mean then that the thing that we possibly fear the most or hope for the most is that which we've got to avoid
Forward and backward, it's all movement, isn't it? And movement is the big illusion, isn't it? To be going somewhere, to achieve something, to be something.
Without identity, there can't be direction.
You can't be
It's only
directed.
relative to where you think you are.
Mm.
You know, part of building the illusion around the beingness
Yes,
and begging for the recognition of that illusion.
yes.
Now, these illusions, or identity, it would seem that like is, I don't know if you call it a veil, or it is what supports you.
Yes. Yes.
So it is like, you know, something will happen and it will be like solidifying to your ego, and with that you have a good feeling, you feel powerful, in control,
Yes.
all this.
Yes. It brings about a movement of life. But then we have to go back, and you know, of course, they're cliched sayings, but what about that saying, be still and know that I am? Where is it to be found? It will be found out there. We know it's only here. It has no movement at all.
So it's what you identify with.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that's where the trappings
That's
come in.
Say that again.
It's what we identify with. Because we build our identity often on external things, don't we?
Well, it has to, yeah, everything.
Mm.
The identity can't exist except for on external things, yes?
And as we become more spiritually inclined, the subtleties of that become more dangerous.
Mm.
And
Yes.
you know, for the spiritual teacher, they're often caught in that sphere for a long time, because it's that, well, I'm not attached to anything.
Yes.
Yeah.
To be attached to not being
You
attached.
can be attached to nothing, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
You can be attached to neti or neti. Yes.
Yeah.
You can be attached to-
Especially if you're feeling superior.
You bet, you
Right.
bet. You bet. We see enough of that. and
I'm less attached than
some
you.
of those naked monks and whatever else.
And so then you can see the addiction.
Yes,
Possibility
absolutely.
for
Addiction.
addiction and the actual
Yeah.
movement of the addiction of creating the identity.
They're creating the identity. Yes.
It's like the story you told about the fisherman who gave away all his fish, yet was attached to the two fish heads that he did actually have.
Yes, yes, yes. Yes.
And you know,
The subtleties, and of course this is the message of the Master, just be careful you don't become a beggar.
mm.
Mm.